Homage to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. One of the important things to often test in oneself is the understanding of anicca. And to ask yourself the question, do I really understand anicca? So anicca translates as impermanence, unlasting, ephemeral. And the idea or the meaning behind it is to really understand the fragility of what we construct, that it doesn't last. And often what we do is we test this notion with thoughts that arise and cease. And it's somewhat benign because it's just an observation in many cases that whatever arises in the mind, it passes away. You see the samudaya and the thangama, but it's relatively benign in the sense it doesn't pack any punch. But what does pack a punch is a different kind of question that you ask yourself. And it very much leans on what the Buddha talks about when we talk about the first noble truth of suffering. And that question is, am I going to live to see tomorrow? Will I be here tomorrow? Will I see tomorrow? Now that question, we don't ask ourselves. And it's a question that I was talking to somebody about yesterday. What with all the things that are happening around us. And you really see, even without turning on the news, you really see around your community, in some cases, in some places, the ephemeral quality that we're being faced with each and every day. So where I am at the moment, the neighbors that I have, different times we find out news that, oh, this person has a new sticker on their gate and they're not allowed to leave their home because there is infection. And then you find out the next day, oh, that particular person that you spoke to just a few days ago on the way to the hospital, he's passed away. And so on and so forth, it goes like that. And so I was having this conversation around this question of, will I see tomorrow? And Nicca, so the perversion, the wrong view, the corruption in the mind, would always say, yes, of course I will see tomorrow. Sure I will. Yeah, we got plans for tomorrow. And got plans for the next day and things in a few months' time. I have bills to pay. I have a job that expects me to turn up. And if you have kids, then, well, there's a full expectation that you're going to be there for your kids, and if they're young, then you expect to see them grow old or older. So Nicca has this quality that, knowingly or unknowingly, but definitely working in the background, does assume that you'll see tomorrow, that you'll live tomorrow. But as a contemplation, anicca doesn't have that quality. Anicca says everything is uncertain. If there is birth, there is aging and death. So aging, we know, each day we're aging. Each time we look in the mirror, it's not necessarily staying young. If you look closer, you see many things as you grow old. And then when it comes to death, well, just like the neighbor that was there on the way to the hospital, he has passed away. So that's very striking, that death is actually quite a possibility. It's always been a possibility. It's always been a certainty. But until you're faced with it, you don't get challenged. And so Anicca is actually saying the future is very uncertain. One cannot say for sure. One cannot know that it's not going to happen tomorrow, tonight, the next moment, that death may come. And so when you think about it that way as a contemplation, it starts to shake the wrong view. It starts to really challenge. And it's a good thing when that happens, because this kind of questioning, this kind of contemplation, it's not benign, it's very active and it's very real. So when you think about all the plans that are based on living tomorrow and living into the future, that's a lot of heavy stuff that we carry with us, that we assume, that we expect. It should be something that's going to happen. But in reality, when you understand birth, aging, sickness, and death, you can't know for sure. And when we assume that we're going to live into old age, that's another thing that's a huge assumption. It may not be the case, and one shouldn't be alarmed about it. One should actually take it on board and live with anicca in mind, because one, you make the most of each and every moment of each and every day, and in a particular way that is driven by gratitude, maybe appreciation that it is a short time frame, potentially. It could be longer, and maybe you can consider that a bonus in many ways. Now, Buddha talks about human life as quite precious and quite rare. And that is another thing that we don't really contemplate very often. And particularly in Dhamma, it's something that is probably a necessity to contemplate more deeply. Why does the Buddha say it's so rare? Why does the Buddha say it's so precious? Because when you contemplate anicca and the precious nature that this Buddha talks about, then it gives a different angle from which one operates in daily life and in Dhamma practice. That you start to gather that actually there is a bit of a sense of urgency here. There is something that is quite valuable in making the most of what little time we have around survival needs of earning a living, keeping the roof over our head, paying our bills, looking after our loved ones, looking after ourselves, and the whole sense of the life construction. So we do those things, but when it comes to the practice, what's really important about it? Well, this question of will I see tomorrow is actually quite an important one, because it shakes us. It makes us ask, what do we really know? What do we really need to look at that the Buddha is asking us to look at? And so what really happens when you contemplate in this way is certain things start to shake, certain things start to fall away. So one of the things is wrong view. Wrong view around I have plenty of time, or wrong view around just simply observing thoughts arising and passing away and thinking, I really understand anicca, I really understand impermanence. But it only really opens up the mind, starts to shatter nicca when you ask, will I live tomorrow? Because if you think that you won't live tomorrow, that there's a possibility, a 50-50 chance, that goes a huge way to understanding our larger predicament. And it's not just one person needing to understand this. This is collectively, all of us. So if we birth this body, then there is aging and death, and then the whole mass of suffering. So wrong view gets challenged when you pose that question, because the ground is a little more shaky. It's always been shaky, but now it's been shaken up a bit. That which you thought was very steady, very permanent, infallible, not fragile, it really is. There's nothing benign about that. That's something quite shocking. And so when you shake up the ground, then what goes away? Well, the wrong view starts to go away. And so when you have right view, you start to ask the question. You start to meditate from a place that is quite helpful. And then when you look at it in this way, a lot of conceit falls away. The conceit that I'm in control of this. I have control of all the conditions. I can make it last. That's not true, is it? So the falsity, the lies that we inadvertently tell ourselves, they start to fall away, they start to crack open. We're really not in control. The fact that we can get sick is testimony to that. The aging process is a testimony to that. Watching people pass away at any age is a testimony to that. And so the conceit around, I'm young, I've still got a long time to live, or I'm, and we think we're young at any age. You speak to people that are 80 and they genuinely feel young at 80 because they look at the 90-year-old, 100-year-old, and they think relative to them they're young. And of course the young person assumes that there's a long way to go. I mean, this conceit is actually one that is quite troublesome, because it makes us make all these plans and think that next year we'll be doing this or that, and the year after it'll be like this or that. When we look at our children, we think, yeah, of course I'm going to see them when they graduate. Of course I'm going to be here when they get married. Of course I'm going to be here when they have children. But nothing is actually for sure. And that's a very stark reminder. And it's not something that one should fear. It's actually something that is more of a factual investigation with one's mind about anicca. Because each person, what we often do is say, I am in control, I can control my conditions. If I don't like the temperature of the room, I go to the thermostat and I change it. If I don't like what I'm watching on television, I turn the channel. If I don't like the noise that's coming from outside, I'll close the window. Or I'll go and tell someone to turn that noise off. Little things to big things, we can think we're in control. But of course it's not true, even at the mundane level. Like, how much can we control what the government is doing? How much can we control what the doctors are saying? How much can we control even now about being able to leave our homes? We can't control any of those things. We can barely control what our children do, what they see on the internet, what they do with their friends. Same as with our parents. We can't tell them what to do, just as much as we don't want them to tell us what to do. There is no actual control, even at the mundane level. It's quite limited. And so when it comes to controlling conditions, trying to reconstruct, at the level of consciousness, often what happens in the process that we can't see when we think we can fix it and we can't, is that the picture that consciousness goes towards, the first one, the pre-sanyas, the pre-sankharas, they're often the ideal, what we think we want, what we think we can get out of something. And then when we try and match it to the reality, which is the post-sanya, the post-sankhara, what happens is they don't match. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fix things. And it's constantly shattering, but it's happening at the level that it's so quick we don't see. And that's why we get sad, that's why we get angry, that's why things don't often work. Internally they're not working, externally they're not working. With the aging sense faculties, it's very difficult for things to match as well. So there's this thing happening, but we're not fully aware of it. But when you start to look at it, you start to really realize, well, what am I craving? I'm craving for things that are death-bound. I'm wanting to even reconstruct another body that is also going to have this aging thing. And so it's always going to be challenged when it comes to matching up the pre and the post in terms of what is real. So it gets challenged. So when you start to understand anicca more, you don't make so many plans. Plans are often things that will eventually disappoint us when they're unfulfilled, or where they can't meet the expectation of it should be like this. I planned it. And uncertainty in this wholesome sense of anicca, this wholesome reflection of really taking anicca into our minds, understanding birth means aging, sickness and death, then you start to live more with what unfolds. You honor what unfolds, you bear with those conditions, you don't make them worse, nor do you blindly try to fix them. You do the best that you can with equanimity. But what also comes is that you're more vigilant, you're less negligent. If you think even that you have a 50-50 chance of seeing tomorrow, then you live with more honor, with more vigilance, less negligence. You don't waste time. You're not frivolous. And you're more honorable and respectful in the relationships at each moment. You take more care with how you speak. If you think that you may not see tomorrow, what are the last things that you want to say to people? If we lived each and every day in this way, the relationships that we have with people would be less short in temper, irritable, cruel. It would be more respectful to particularly our loved ones. We take our loved ones for granted. They are the ones that bear the brunt of impatience, intolerance, quick to anger sometimes. And so there's something quite lovely about, if I'm not here tomorrow, and you think about this every day, then the way that you treat your children, the way you treat your partner, the way that you treat your parents, the way that you treat your neighbor, the way that you treat your work colleagues, it doesn't have to be all the way onto the other side of being overly nice or overly anything, but it's more that it's tempered with this thing of honoring that relationship, appreciating that relationship in a very balanced and wholesome way. And so you don't take it for granted. So there's something really nice about that. There's something that lives up to the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path when it comes to, if you have right view, then you have right intention. So with right intention, it comes with renunciation, it comes with non-ill will, and it comes with non-cruelty. So you see how that really starts to develop. That renunciation comes that you share, you're generous, you give up hoarding, you give up keeping things for oneself and for the people that you like, you share it out. You give what you can, you don't give everything, but sometimes there's this inner voice that says, but what if something happens that I need that? But the thing is, this person needs it right now. And so what you do is you give because you're actually okay. And when you do that, it actually unlocks something in yourself that, wow, yeah, I can do that more easily. So even when someone that you know asks you for something and it's something that at times you may have in the past said, oh, but I'm going to need that and I don't really want to give it. But it opens it up to more generosity, more giving up, more relinquishment, because what's holding you back is always tanha, craving. I need it for later. And hoarding comes from that as well, where out of this sense of fear comes from holding on to me and mine, holding on to self and whatever you consider as part of you, what's yours. Then hoarding comes from that, and so you have this fear for oneself and for your loved ones, and so you hoard. But the thing is, if you pose that question again, what if I won't see tomorrow, or will I see tomorrow, then what's the point of hoarding? And so it really helps to balance out one's view. It's not to dictate whether you should hoard or not. Lay people have this ability to hoard, and it happens not just during the time of a pandemic or war or anything like that, or when there are food shortages, but it also happens in everyday life, because lay people just have that ability to have a pantry and to store food. The Buddha's vehicle of ordaining and becoming a monastic, it doesn't give you that. It's not meant to. You're meant to pindapat, and that is entirely different, and for good reason, because it really wants you to see and to be linked in a wholesome way for only what is needed. And so then when you think about non-ill will, well, of course, when you understand that all my brothers and sisters in the world, in all different forms, all living beings, when they're also subject to aging, sickness and death, then you understand what I'm suffering right now. May my brothers and sisters not have to go through this. If they are suffering just as much as me, if not more, or even a little, then may they also be free from this suffering. And that's what metta is, that you recognize this universal predicament of old age, sickness and death. And when you understand that, then metta just flows. It genuinely flows. We are all in the same boat. And where is the ill will then? If you know your neighbor is not going to live to see tomorrow, if you know your partner is not going to live to see tomorrow, if you know your kids are not going to live to see tomorrow, that there is some uncertainty there, where is the ill will, the impatience, the intolerance? And same with non-cruelty. In our words, in the way we think about others, do we honor them as human beings, as living beings? Do we honor the animals in the world in the same way? The insects, all the things that we can and can't see that exist. Cruelty comes when we don't have this notion of anicca. And so we're not careful with what we say. We're not careful with how we think about people. We disparage, we derogate in our minds. We tell people off in our minds. So with right view, right intention really gets fulfilled because it's very helpful. Therefore, what flows from that is right speech, right action, right livelihood. You really see how the Noble Eightfold Path can activate really well when you have right view. There's certain things you just won't do because you have right view. It just gets abandoned. It's like, I can't do that. And you make the right effort because that sense of urgency really comes. So something as simple as asking yourself, do I understand anicca? Asking a question like, will I see tomorrow? So very powerful. And so then you make more effort towards right mindfulness, remembering not to take the perversion of lastingness, of permanency, not to think that you can control these conditions, and looking at the other perversions, and then developing the right concentration. If you take that into meditation, it can be very powerful. So something to ponder, something to contemplate, something to use in a very wholesome way to challenge oneself and to see how it affects one's mind and one's speech and one's action. So we can share the merit with all sentient beings. May all beings be happy and well. May all beings be free from suffering. Blessings of the Triple Gem, wishing you all well. Theruwan saranai.